Hello, everybody, and welcome to Huntsville Huddle. A little bit of a change of pace. My name is Dalton Meyer, and I'm hosting this week. And being on the football team, something that is really important is dieting and nutrition. And so I'm really glad to welcome our guest, Coach Susana Melendez. Coach, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me, actually.
Of course. So starting off, let's get to the nitty-gritty, the beginning of your your sport career. And so as a young age, what sports did you like to do, and what was something that you enjoyed doing that kind of transitioned to eventually kind of stay in the athletic world?
So I played every sport that I could when I was younger. Primarily just soccer, I think, was my main sport. I also did a little bit of running. But what ended up happening was I was playing my sport, soccer, and my coach told me that I was too small to continue to play at a high level. And then I realized, oh my gosh, maybe I should start paying attention to what I'm eating and getting in the weight room and figuring that part out kind of changed my game.
So I know that, once you go through high school, you ended up on the national Mexican soccer team, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me how that happened. What got you to that position? How was it? Because I know, a lot of us, I played on the national championship team, but you were on a national team, and I know that was more than one game. So talk to me about that and how you got there.
So that was a really interesting process. I have a double nationality. So my parents are Mexican nationality, and then I was born in the U.S. So there was actually a Mexican national team scout at one of our tournaments. He just saw me play and then contacted my coaches, and then they got me out to Mexico City. And I was out there for maybe a month or two where I played maybe 2 or 3 games with the Mexican national team. So that's kind of how that happened. They just happened to see me at a tournament and kind of picked me up from there. And it was fun going all the way to Mexico City was a little bit different.
Yeah, and speaking of that, how was it different? Being in Mexico and being in America, of course, culture is different, and sports are probably different, especially the game of soccer, how important it is in Mexico. So how was it? Were you nervous? Was the stances different? Like, just talk to me about the differences between the two, being in Mexico and playing in America.
So I think the biggest difference is going to be the resources that we had. We were training on a field that we had to share with our men's team. And if you know anything about Mexico and soccer, the men's team kind of rules everything. So we'd have to get off of the field when the men decided that they wanted to come out and train. Like, really interesting things like that. The day started a little bit later, whereas here I feel like the training sessions are earlier in the morning, but in Mexico everything kind of just starts with breakfast, and then like 10 a.m. you kind of move on throughout your day. I think that was the biggest difference, but I was definitely nervous when I first got there. I mean, this is national team.
Yeah.
So it was a very competitive, a lot of girls there, some other girls from the U.S., so it was fun.
And, going back to being a dietitian and food, being on the national team, what was the best meal you've ever had there? I know Mexican food here is good, but I couldn't even imagine being in Mexico. So what was the best thing you had there, and what was their diet situation like? I know on the national team, what did it look like? Were y'all given meals? Did you have to kind of come up with your own? How did that work?
So starting with your first question, the best meal I think I had were tacos. It's kind of hard to stray from that. But then I would say there were a lot of differences and differences that I have to address with my own athletes now. Mainly in that you're served a lot of dishes that are like heritage based, so a lot of beans. There's a lot of those cultural foods, like high carbohydrate concentrated foods that I wasn't used to at the time. So just as an example, we would have breakfast like at 10 a.m. And there were beans in there, and we'd have to go train like an hour later. So that was super interesting. And I mean, I wish had known then what I know now, because I would have, I think, performed a little bit better, being more prepared in that nutritional aspect.
So moving on, going to college, where did you play college soccer at, and what got you to that point? Like, how did you get recruited? What was your journey to end up where you did?
So I attended the University of Arizona, and I actually grew up in a border town about an hour south of there. So I grew up kind of idolizing these girls that I would go watch them every weekend at their home games. I was actually a ball girl when I was like maybe 10 for the University of Arizona. So that was kind of my dream school, and I really wanted to go there. So I actually ended up going to Arizona as a walk-on. My grades were really good. Thankfully, my parents kind of kept me on task. So they didn't really offer me a scholarship. They said, your grades are so good. You don't need this money. And then as I kind of transitioned, like sophomore, junior year, they started giving me more scholarship until finally they gave me a full when I was a junior.
Did you study nutrition? Did you know in college that that's what you wanted to do?
Not initially. At first, I did a translation interpretation. That's like a Spanish language major. And then that's when the coach kind of mentioned, oh, I think you're too small. Maybe you should consider transferring. And then he said, why don't you try to find a dietitian? And we didn't have one on campus. So there was really no one I could go to. I had to Google, how can I gain 10 pounds in a month? So that's kind of how I transitioned into maybe I should take a nutrition class. And then I fell in love with nutrition, so I ended up doing 2 majors.
And then the final question in college before we kind of move on to your professional career, and it's kind of the big question a lot of college athletes will ask, or people that are in high school. What was that last game for you like, knowing that it was it, you were done, and you're kind of moving on into an adult life, moving on into nutrition life? You knew what you wanted to do at that point, but that last game, what was it like? It
was really bittersweet because, as you know, it's exciting because you're going into, your life, your adult life. And I was really exhausted from so many years of 20 years of playing my sport. So I was in a sense ready to kind of move on, but at the same time kind of heartbroken that I had to move on. Yeah, that was a tough day. I remember crying for a little while.
Yeah, that's something I'm not excited for, but I know it's coming. Now you're an adult. You're done with college. Talk to me, because of course Sam wasn't your first spot, Sam Houston. So where did you end up first? And kind of talk to me about each of those jobs briefly and how to compare to living in Texas or working here at Sam.
Right. So I actually stayed at Arizona because I had a little bit of more schooling to do since I did a second degree. So I stayed at University of Arizona and kind of interned on my own with our kind of campus nutrition department. Helped with a little bit of the athletics. And then after that, I went on to a job at Liberty University where I interned in their sports nutrition department. And then went on to work for the New York Mets, and then as a private consultant, sort of. That's where that second other degree came in with the Spanish translating and interpreting. So that it was nice to be able to sort of combine my degrees. And then I ended up at Sam, which I absolutely love. And Texas is extremely different from any other place I've been. I think it's that kind of sense of pride that people have at the university level, the town level, the state level. I think honestly, it's really unmatched, and it makes for a really great kind of atmosphere and experience. And just obviously football in itself is that way on its own, but just add another layer with Texas. Yeah. The fandom is insane.
And you talk about being an intern, and you always hear the horror stories of whether it was an office or being a sport intern. So did you have any of those kind of horror stories where you were just the guy or the girl, giving coffee or signing paperwork? Gosh. How was the intern life for you before you officially became your own nutritionist, your own person?
Yes. So the intern life was tough. I remember one morning having to show up for football lifts. And we were going to make breakfast after. I'm pretty sure I had to crack 400 plus eggs that morning. It was pretty brutal. And coincidentally, I still do that now. Yeah. But that was probably one of my horror stories.
So now, the big question, Sam Houston, you come here, and I remember being in the meeting room, and we heard we're getting a new strength coach and new nutritionist. And funny story about your strength coach, because our strength coach is actually your husband, Coach Parker.
Right.
So how did you meet Coach Parker? And I know that one of the big deals for y'all is y'all wanted to be together. Wherever you ended up, you wanted to be together. So is that what Sam offered, and that what you ended up with? Why did you choose Sam? And like I said, how did you meet Coach Parker?
Right. So I met him at University of Arizona. and he was actually my strength coach. But I was very professional and I was so focused on my sport. I didn't even two different things. So I stayed and I interned. And then when I stayed and I interned, I think that relationship kind of changed. And we became friends. And then before you knew it, etc. Right? And so then we kind of went our separate ways when I left to Liberty, and then realized, this is what we're meant to be with each other, kind of got married, and then went into the private sector. And so we decided, the next place we go, we want to be together at a university, and we want to be together at a football program so that we can impact more people in a more holistic way. Yeah. So through nutrition and through strength.
So the big question, the national championship run, you and Coach Parker were such a big part of that, and Coach Keeler always says of how important y'all were. So how much pressure was there for you, because you have to feed all these football players, and I could atone for that. We were kind of getting run down towards the end of it.
Yes.
It's a long season, especially in the spring with COVID, everything going on. So what was your strategy to feeding us, and what was your favorite memory of the national championship run, including the game? I know we have a couple pictures of us hanging out at the end. There's a really cool video of you falling on your knees when we hoisted up the trophy. It's a great memory. But talk to me about that kind of year, that run, and what you had to do to put into it.
Oh gosh, so it was a lot, starting with pandemic, right? that we all would like to forget about, and then we went into the ice storm right after. If you remember that first game we were supposed to have, and then got kind of tacked on to the end. So that was really, really challenging, and then. We had to figure out how to keep you all healthy after not having you play for like 6 months. So that had a lot to do with your fueling habits, your workouts in the weight room, and just, trying to give you enough calories in general, just giving you enough volume to be able to sustain all of that playing. And that went into like the national title week, where we had to come together as a staff and plan all of your meals, for every day that we were out, and get you the right nutrients, get you close enough to meet those needs at that level.
And then talk to me about the national championship game. I have so many memories of it. What was your favorite memory and just that experience as a whole?
I don't know if it was my favorite memory, but what I remember the most was the rain. I think we were just all completely drenched within 10 minutes of starting that game. And then I think for me, what was my favorite moment was getting into that point where we had that break, and then it was like everyone was looking at me to figure out how to keep you fueled and get you back on the field, which I know is not something that the other guys had planned ahead for, but we had planned ahead. And I think, according to me, that made a huge difference in keeping you fueled the rest of the game.
It definitely paid off. I remember you kind of running around the locker room, giving everybody sandwiches when we can. But we won the game, and we move on to the next year. But this next year, you kind of had a bigger challenge where you ended up taking more sports than just football. So what is the difference between feeding, a football player compared to a volleyball player and a soccer player? Because, of course, I'm 6'1", 250 pounds.
Right.
You don't have to feed a soccer player that much like me. So what is the difference between teams, and was it hard taking the ball to teams? Was this kind of what you wanted to do? You wanted to be a main nutritioner for everybody, or maybe you just wanted to stick with football?
I like the idea of working with everyone because, no offense, but it gives me a break from y'all at the same time. But I like working with everyone because, like you said, every sport comes with its unique challenges. So like a soccer player would be fueled a little differently in terms of how many carbs that they're going to be having, how much protein they're going to be consuming. So it would be different with a cross-country runner, right? Because they're going, who knows, hours every day. So their needs are going to be very high calorie, but very different macronutrient compositions. That's something that people don't understand.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you. I do especially. You always kind of help me out with everything. And I'm glad you came on the show and got to share your experiences and talk football, talk nutrition. This was Huntsville Huddle. I enjoyed being your guest. I hope to see you soon, and we'll talk to you next time.